दोस्तों let's check the latest news update with Vishal.
Hello and welcome to Friends World TV. I'm your host Vishal Venkatesh. Thank you for joining the weekly English news bulletin today on Friends World TV. And there's been a lot of news in the last week, of course. We've got so many people, celebrities, politicians, a lot of people diagnosed with COVID-19, unfortunately. And of course, there's the Gladys Berejiklian incident. But as always, let's get to the headlines first. New South Wales man Ottayuni Lawson pleads guilty to illegally crossing the Northern Territory border to take photos of Uluru. Refugee rights activists have vandalised Prime Minister Scott Morrison's car with red paint during his visit to the University of Queensland earlier this week. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian is currently under fire as she faces rowdy question time following Maguire scandal. And strict new South Australian gel blaster laws have seen a regional business crumble overnight, according to his younger owner. And Victoria records 7 new coronavirus cases and also 5 deaths. Flooding in Southeast Asia leaves at least 20 people dead and unfortunately thousands more homeless. US President Donald Trump, his doctor says that the US president has tested negative to COVID-19. Kanye West has dropped the first advertisement in his 2020 US presidential election campaign, posting it on his Twitter account. And Donald and Melania Trump's son, Barron Trump, tested positive for COVID-19, but showed no symptoms and has since tested negative, the US First Lady has revealed. Norway says Russia is behind the cyber attack against its own parliament. And footage shows Belarus security forces breaking up protests with water cannons and batons. Now, let's get to the first incident at play in regards to a hitchhiking incident. A New South Wales man has pleaded guilty to illegally crossing the Northern Territory border so he could take photos of Uluru. The Alice Springs local court heard Ottayoni Lawson arrived at the South Australian Northern Territory border on September the 13th and turned around when he learned that he would have to enter quarantine if he wanted to cross. And after encountering police at the border, Lawson parked his car 2 kilometers away in a roadside drain. The 23-year-old was eventually arrested and put into hotel quarantine at the cost of $2.5K. He was also admitted in regards to inaccurate information on his border checkpoint form. Refugee rights activists have vandalized Prime Minister Scott Morrison's car with red paint during his visit to the University of Queensland earlier this week. Around 50 protesters gathered at the university's Australian Institute of Bioengineering and Nanotechnology, where the Prime Minister was touring at 9:30 a.m. A 19-year-old woman has been charged with the public nuisance over protest, and police said other protesters could also be charged. Police formed a barrier outside the entrance to the building where protesters were chanting "Lock up ScoMo" while carrying signs and tomatoes. It is understood that the Prime Minister Scott Morrison was escorted out through a loading bay shortly after the building went into lockdown. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian faced an unsurprisingly boisterous and rowdy question time on Tuesday afternoon, to say the least, as she continues to stand her ground over Daryl Maguire scandal. Labor has moved a motion of no confidence against Gladys, and she faced a barrage of heckling and questioning as she faced Parliament for the very first time since this scandal broke to the media, and the public, of course. The New South Wales Premier maintains that she has done nothing wrong in connection to a relationship with Daryl Maguire, and she brands it as a stuff-up in her personal life. Strict new South Australian gel blaster laws have seen a regional business crumble overnight, according to its young owner. New laws in South Australia require gel blaster owners to hold a firearms license. A Riverland teenager says his business has been devastated as a result of this. And police, on the other hand, say that the skirmish field businesses may be able to stay open provided that they can comply with regulations. Now let's go to the Victorian COVID-19 update. Victoria has recorded 7 new cases of coronavirus and 5 deaths, the state's health department says. The new cases bring Melbourne's 14-day rolling average back to 9.6, while regional Victoria's rolling average has risen to 0.6. 4 new cases were recorded in the regional centres of Shepparton and Barsindale. The 5 fatalities bring Victoria's death toll for the pandemic to 816. And more than 24 people have been killed by flooding in various regions of Southeast Asia, with more missing and thousands of homes inundated as tropical storms sweep the region again and again. At least 17 individuals have died, and more than 31,000 people have been left homeless in Vietnam. 10 people have reportedly drowned, and 1 person has been killed by lightning in Cambodia. Typhoon Linfina made landfall in Vietnam this morning. Donald Trump's doctor says that the US president has tested negative for coronavirus on consecutive days. He said the negative tests and other clinical and laboratory data indicate a lack of detectable viral replication. News of the negative test arrived as Mr. Trump was traveling to Florida to appear at a campaign rally, his first outside Washington, D.C., since he contracted COVID-19. And Kanye West, the famous American rapper, has dropped the first advertisement in his 2020 US presidential election campaign, posting it on his Twitter account. The ad, which has a strong religious theme, ends with a message telling supporters, "Write in Kanye West." It's a plan from the rapper and would-be politician to establish himself as a popular write-in candidate. A black man who was led through the streets of a Texas town by 2 while police officers on horseback pulling a rope has sued the US city and its police as well for $1 million, saying he suffered humiliation and fear during his arrest. Donald Neely was homeless at the time of his arrest and was sleeping on a footpath. One of the officers was overheard twice saying that leading him by rope through the streets would look bad. Mr. Neely's lawsuit says he felt as though he was put on display as the slaves once were. Now to the UK COVID-19 update. Britain's opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has called for a circuit breaker national lockdown after it was revealed Boris Johnson's government ignored scientific advisors who called for a similar lockdown last month to halt the spread of COVID-19. Sir Keir Starmer has called on the UK government to impose a national lockdown, and it was revealed by the government that it ignored its own scientific advisors to impose a similar lockdown. And the UK, in regards to COVID-19, has recorded around 17,000 new daily cases and 143 deaths as of Tuesday. North Korea has revealed previously unseen intercontinental ballistic missiles at an unprecedented pre-dawn military parade that showcased the country's long-range weapons for the first time in nearly 2 years. The missiles were displayed during a parade to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the founding of the country's ruling Workers' Party, that is its Labour Party. The Hwasong-15, the longest range missile ever tested by North Korea, was one of the showcased weapons. And Mr. Kim blamed international sanctions and COVID-19 for preventing economic progress. Now to the Barron Trump incident. Donald and Melania Trump's son, Barron, tested positive for coronavirus, but showed no symptoms and has since tested negative, the US First Lady has officially revealed. Barron Trump was tested multiple times after his parents contracted the virus just earlier this month, and the first tests came back negative, but he then tested positive for COVID-19. Melania Trump confirmed that she has since tested negative, according to the doctors, of course. Norway's government has accused Russia of being behind a cyber attack launched against its parliament in August, an allegation Russia denies. Norway says email accounts of several members of parliament were hacked, and Russia has denied the accusations, saying they were not backed up by evidence. When the cyber attacks were announced in September, authorities did not say who was behind it. And security forces have used water cannons and batons to break up continuing protests demanding a new election in Belarus amid signs that President Alexander Lukashenko may be willing to compromise. Protesters have been taking to the streets in Belarus since the presidential elections back on the 9th of August. The election has widely been condemned as rigged and extremely corrupt, and Mr. Lukashenko on Saturday met with detained opposition leaders in Minsk jail. And two of the world's highest profile sportsmen, Cristiano Ronaldo and Dustin Johnson, have tested positive to COVID-19. Portugal's Football Federation confirmed in a statement on its website that the superstar of the world game Ronaldo has tested positive to the virus. Cristiano Ronaldo's Juventus team had been in isolation after club staff tested positive on the 4th of October, and Mr. Ronaldo tested positive for the virus less than 24 hours after dining with other members of the Portuguese national team. And world number one, Dustin Johnson, has withdrawn from this week's PGA Tour event, which was scheduled to be in Las Vegas, and obviously the reason is because he's tested positive to the COVID-19 virus. That's all the news for this week. Stay tuned to Friends World TV for more news around the clock. I'll see you next week. This is Vishal.